Okay, Tom, back again. What we're going to go on to next is actually loop pile carpet. And loop pile is a little different than cut pile, but many of the things are exactly the same. Let's start with what's exactly the same. First thing is, same as last time, we found nap direction. Even on carpet that doesn't look like it has a nap, it has a nap direction. And it's the same exact thing, that pencil and paper test. And I just roll it and it moves in the direction of the nap. So I know the nap is in that direction. Now, if this was going towards the fireplace or the kitchen or whatever, it would not change on the recipient area where the damage is. But I like to mark it just so we are, in case we move these pieces around as I'm teaching the class. So we know the nap direction is here. Now the next thing we're going to talk about, let me move this off the carpet for just off the pad for just a moment here. Next thing we're going to talk about, and I've marked the nap direction for this donor piece already to save us some time. We're going to look at this and we're going to say, well, next thing we do is we're going to have to cut this. Now, if we want to find a row, we're going to use and be able to find a row pretty easily on a lot of these carpets going the length and width, okay? And they're at 90-degree angles. Now, sometimes, no matter what you do, you will not be able to find a row going at a 90-degree angle on these loop carpets. And that's because sometimes they're made with what's called a step-over tufting process. And how you'll find your rows then is at a 45-degree angle. And so what you'll do instead of cutting a square like this is you'll put yourself at a 45-degree angle and you'll cut a square, but if you looked at it from straight on, it would be a diamond or a parallelogram. But it's just cutting at a 45-degree angle where you find the rows, so you're cutting in between the loops. Now, other than that, it's identical to cut pile carpet. We're going to try something a little different. We're going to use a cookie cutter for this one. Now, I want to demonstrate two things. Number one, cut pile carpet, we said how great it cuts from the back, and that's wonderful. But if you try cutting from the back on a loop carpet, a lot of times what happens, let's see if it happens now or makes a liar out of me. A lot of times, there it's cut through, okay? But what we find is, even though it's cut through, you see all these stringers? You see how that looks? That's really bad. And it's really hard, and you'll have pulled yarns and everything. So on loop pile carpet, we don't cut from the back. It is different. On loop pile carpet, to do the same thing, now I know I'm going to cut here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here and I'm going to mark my direction on this donor piece so that when I cut this out, I'll know what direction my nap is, because once I move the carpet and move that donor piece carried into the living room, I may get confused. So I mark the direction underneath where I'm going to cut. I'm going to take this and I'll do the same thing. I'm going to cut, but I'm cutting from the surface. Now, sometimes when you're cutting from the surface, the piece will actually turn instead of cutting through. Now, this cut through pretty well, but there are still one little teeny stringer. Notice I didn't pull or yank. I just took the blade and lightly cut it. Now, there's my nap direction on the piece. Now, that's my donor piece. We're going to make that the donor piece, okay? So now I have a donor piece. Now let's get this other carpet back here. We already determined the nap direction was this way. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut a hole in the middle of this carpet. Okay, we're going to take the same cookie cutter. We're going to set it here. And we're going to cut out a pretend damaged area. Okay, so I've cut this through. I think I've got it really nice. Let's see. Pop the piece out. Again, a little stringer. You have to be very careful not to pull or yank. You don't want to do that. And this was the nap direction for this one. So if I was going to use this for something else, I would mark the nap direction. Okay, now let's talk about seam sealing. You can use the liquid or the thermoplastic. For this particular demonstration, I'm going to go ahead, let's move these out of here. And I'm going to go ahead and use the thermoplastic just because it's a little quicker and I don't have to wait so long for it to dry. And again, I would take my carpet awl and stick it through the carpet and up and lift so that I could get that carpet lifted slightly off the pad and put my seam sealer on. And it's a great thing when you're ambidextrous or you're well coordinated. And you can put these in and get the glue around really well. I'm going to switch to the opposite hand now. Same thing, lift it up, squeeze the adhesive on. Try to get a nice even attachment of that adhesive, a nice even bead around the edges. Now remember, with the hot melt glue, you do not grab it with your thumb and forefinger because you will burn the bejesus out of yourself. Then you take your donor piece that you're going to use and you do the same thing. You just get a bead of glue. Oh, too much glue going, hold on. You just get that bead of glue going and you slightly squeeze while you're spinning the piece. Now be careful when you're doing this that you're not running your hand on the outside edge, because as you spin this you will burn yourself. So you have to be aware of what you're doing to do this well. So there, now I have it glued. Now I'll have to wait a minute or so for that glue to set. While it's doing that, I'll leave it right here and I'll take a piece of seam tape. Now if the carpet is really taut, you may have to put in stay nails before you cut, and that's in my cookie cutter video. But for now we're just going to put this piece of seam tape in. Now if you can't get it in one piece, you may have to do it like this and work it around to get it underneath. You want to make sure that you check every corner with your fingers without burning yourself, and make sure that there are no folded over edges underneath that carpet. You want to center the tape in the insert about 1 inch on each side. Then you take your piece with the arrow nap direction in, again pushing it back starting here. It's still a little too warm. I'll have to let it sit for just another minute there. If the glue is not solidified enough, now see, this is great because it'll help to hold it and keep the paper from moving, but if it's not solidified and hardened and cooled enough, it's really hard to get it in there properly. So sometimes you have to wait a minute or two for that glue to cool down. Melted my tray. So you can unplug that now. So as the glue cools down, it'll be ready for me to do this. Let's see if it's cool enough yet. Oh, that's better. Okay, now again, I'm always starting at the direction closest to me, and I'm trying to make sure I have no trapped fibers. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before. With this short nap carpet, I may have to play around a little bit more to get it to match in. But all I'm trying to do is line that up with the backings so that it looks nice and smooth. Sometimes loop carpet is more forgiving, sometimes less. When I get that in there, boy, I think that looks pretty good. Maybe a little bit right here. Okay, so I've got that piece in. I know my piece is here. I'm going to set the cool glide here, put it on transverse. Whoops, plugging it in might help. I'm going to put it on transverse mode again, push the power button. As soon as the light goes off, I'm going to turn it 90 degrees and do the same thing again over the center of that bonded insert, like this. Hit that again. As soon as the light goes off, I'm going to move it. I'm going to track it to make sure the backing is well adhered into that glue, that adhesive. Then I'm going to throw my seam weight on it. Now I'm going to give that about a minute for it to cool off some. And when it cools off, I'll inspect it. And just like before, if I find one corner is not quite right, if I have one corner I don't like, and I'm going to pull this off even though it hasn't set yet. If I found one corner that was slightly high, I could take the cool guide and just cover that corner. As long as the light doesn't flash, as long as it turns green, that means that there's enough tape underneath it for it to work properly. But I'm only heating part of that circle. So if the rest of the circle looks great, I don't need to heat up the whole thing, just one corner of it. Now this one came out beautifully. There's nothing I need to adjust. But sometimes you'll have an adjustment, or you'll cut a square or a rectangle out and you'll have a corner that you have to adjust. That's the most common thing. You just heat it up, adjust it, put it back in, track it with your tracker, throw your seam weight on, and let it dry. Loop carpet is usually pretty forgiving. The one thing you have to remember is you always cut loop carpet from the top to avoid all those stringers like I had here. Okay, these stringers are a nightmare and they're all over here. In fact, if I push it this way, you can see it even better. I think that's a better illustrative of all the stringers around the outside edge. So that's why we cut it from the top, to avoid those stringers and pulling yarns. Okay, so that's the simplest thing. Everything else is pretty much exactly the same, whether you're cutting a square, a rectangle, or a circle. You can use cookie cutters on cut pile carpet. I just did a square for the first one on that. But from a cut pile carpet perspective, you're better to cut from the back. Now, if you have to cut the damaged area, the recipient area, out with it from the top, make sure when you go to the donor area, you flip it over and cut that piece from the backing on that cut pile, because you'll have a lot less cut or damaged tips. And that's it. That's all there is for that segment of doing repairs. So now we've done cut pile carpet and loop carpet and square patches or bonded inserts and cookie cutter bonded inserts. So as you can see, this isn't rocket science. Once you get used to the tools and how to get them, get used to doing glue guns or white latex for seam sealing. It's really very simple work. It just takes a little time, and if you're patient and you make sure that you get it to look perfect first, when you're done, you will have an insert that they can't even find. Okay, so we did it. We seam sealed, we tracked it. After we put the seam in, we tracked it, we put the seam weight on. We now have a very strong, lifelong bonded insert that you cannot even see from the face of the carpet. And I'm up here looking really close. From a distance, from someone who's standing up looking down, they're not going to see any difference. They're going to think you're great. That's all for today, folks. On to the next segment. Thank you very much.